Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you back. Hope you had a good little break. We're going to move forward with the next presenter, which of course is Elder Imelda Perley, and the topic is Canada 150 Ambassadors Celebrating Resilience. I'm going to have the director of the Mi'kmaq Wolastoq Center, Dave Perley, to do the introductions.
Well, Ewan, first of all, I'd like to mention that, as you know, this is Canada's 150th birthday, and the majority of the First Nations across the country have made it clear that they don't want to celebrate Canada's birthday because of what it represents, and we heard some of those concerns by Pam's in Pam's presentation. So we thought about that, and we thought that, well, maybe we should, if we don't want to celebrate Canada's 150th birthday, then we should at least celebrate resiliency. As Pam mentioned, the Indian Act has made every effort to assimilate First Nations across the country. They've taken our language, our ceremonies, our traditions, and attempted to transform our worldviews and so on. But despite all of these oppressive assimilation policies, our language has survived, our traditions have survived, our ceremonies have survived. And in all the First Nations in New Brunswick, if you go to the First Nations, you will always find a sweat lodge keeper, a sacred pipe carrier, a drum keeper. And these, to me, are indications that we are determined to ensure that we revive and rebuild, as Pam mentioned earlier, we rebuild our cultural foundation. Those policies have chipped away at the cultural foundations of Mi'kmaq Wolastoq societies, nations. And now we're at the point that we have to rebuild those cultural foundations for each of those nations. So Imelda, our elder in residence at UNB, who is also a sweat lodge keeper, who is also a sacred pipe carrier, and also teaching Wabanaki worldviews and the language of my ancestors, the Wolastoq. So she has, and she'll explain why she has accepted the position to be Canada's 150 ambassador. So it's, as I mentioned before, it's important to celebrate resiliency, because those policies were very destructive, as Pam has mentioned. Those policies attacked every aspect of our lives, our way of life. So I want to introduce Imelda, and she will explain why she accepted this particular position as Ambassador 150. Lewan?
Well, Ewan, first of all, Uskamil means forever. And as Pam was talking about what is a treaty relationship, and for us, we saw it as Uskamil, Gisquide, a Gizo Stidlosit, Skiqualidly Bamiguk, Smagwanal Bamijuak. As long as the sun shines, the grass grows and the rivers flow. And I think our treaty partner forgot what Uskamil means. It doesn't mean, depends on who the prime minister is, who, the premier is of each province. And so I wanted to put Uskamil in front of 150 because we were here before Canada started celebrating their first birthday, and we'll be here beyond their birthdays. And so that's what that means. So right underneath it, you'll see some names. A blossom was Dliwiagopa Nokmas. My grandmother gifted me with that name, a blossom was. But 68 years ago, I wasn't allowed to use it in the school that I went to in my home community, which wasn't too far from where I lived. I was so proud of that name, but when we got there, you weren't allowed to use your traditional names. So I stand before you today at 68, almost 69, that I remembered that name. That's my resilience, that they didn't take it away from me. And as Pam said, it's rebuilding, it's remembering. Now, I did forget the name for a long time, but it was a ceremony I did with Elder Gwen Bear, the late Elder Gwen Bear, Sagate. We did a ceremony in Garden River. And at that time, there was an Ojibwe elder doing a shaken tent ceremony. And of course, it was my first time going to ceremony and fasting. And I was kind of not trusting, thinking, oh, I don't want an Ojibwe elder to give me a name. I want a Wolastoqey elder to give me a name. And so I resisted. So I kind of left the crowd and sat by myself, then realizing everybody's looking at me. I better go up and offer my tobacco too. So at the end, I did, but as I'm standing in line, I could hear sounds coming from the tent. I could hear thunder and animal sounds and wind and so on and so forth. First thing that came to mind was Wizard of Oz. You know, I'm thinking that he had something behind that because we couldn't see the elder. And but when it came to my turn, I offered my tobacco, and I heard my grandmother's voice. My grandmother's voice, she had passed away like 20 years before that. And she said, I've already given you a name, you don't need another name. Gakims learned that name first. So I did my research. I was so emotional. And from that day on, I trust ceremony. I trust those shaken tent ceremonies. I trust Vision Quest. I trust pipe ceremonies. I trust all of those because it was my grandmother's voice that came back to me to remind me of that name. So I've been learning what the name means. It's Moon of the Whirling Wind. It's one of the 13 moons that my people abided by. We didn't use a 12-month calendar. So that's resilience, that I remembered that I was named after one of those moons. So I'm really active in trying to recreate what those moons have to teach us. The next ceremony I did in my own territory, Mungwinaluk, was a name actually, got it in New Zealand. Elder Gwen Bear did the ceremony. And she says, I can't put it together. We'll have to wait until you come to your territory. But I know it has something to do with water, and I know it has something to do with wind. So when I brought it back to my territory, I went to my elder, Charles Salmon. And I says, well, Gwen kind of saw my name. It has to do with wind, and it has to do with water. He said, Alokil, Abjilnil Zamagwan. He said, you're a cloud because you've been learning from me for so many years. And you're going to be taking my teachings, I'm water, and you're going to be the cloud that takes those teachings to all peoples. So when I did my ceremony at the mounds to feast my name in November, which I'm going back to feast my name again, because I have to ask permission every year that I can keep the name. So in November, I feasted my name, and a rainbow appeared, and I ended up saying Mungwinaluk instead of Alux. I went back to my elders. You know what happened? You called me Aluk, but Mungwin also came. He goes, well, looks like the spirits wanted to name you too. So that's what Mungwinaluk, it means rainbow cloud. And what the rainbow aspect means is that it's for all peoples, not just indigenous peoples, that I offer, knowledge to. And so Mungwinaluk, the other one is from Cree grandmothers, Okmi, which means grandmother, and Gamiwan, rain, which has to do with gentle teachings. And there's two rains that we have. One is the one that rains so hard that it puddles, and they call those the grandfather rains, so that we can go and play in those puddles. And then there's a gentle one that you just put your face up to, and it's that grandmother rain. And so that's what my name is. So that's identity, and that's the resilience of being able to carry these names, as opposed to using the colonized name of Imelda and then the other one, Mary. So that's the first part of my resilience. Now, I was asked in November to be Canada 150 ambassador, and I declined at first. I said, let me think about it, because I knew of the resistance that was going across. Then I got to thinking, as Dave said, I said, I would have a soapbox to be able to showcase my language, what I learned from my language, what I know from my language, how I'm shaped from my language, how I'm shaped by my elders' teachings, how I'm shaped from land, water, air, my four-legged relatives. So I did something I'm not used to doing yet. I'm still learning. I started a Twitter account. I don't do Facebook, but I realized I'm going to have to. So in my Twitter account, this is what's on my Twitter account, Uskamil150. And I started off with just putting my language up. Then I realized, well, how am I going to teach people about the language? So I started phonetically writing it so that people will learn the beauty of our language and why it needs to survive. Because it has all those words of hope, harmony, peace, friendship, forgiveness, love. So important to have to know that word, because love is what my grandmother said would, when we started learning English, the one thing she said was, don't ever bring the English word H-A-T-E into this house. Because if you do, you'll learn how it feels, you'll learn what it means, you might even react from it. And so we were never allowed to take that word. And I see now, as Pam mentioned, what's happening in the United States, there's so much H-A-T-E, in their society. And we've experienced it here as well. Not that long ago, there was a conference here at St. Thomas, and there was a group that defaced our sign just because it was in our language. So that hurts. So there's still H-A-T-E here. But I think it's our responsibility to be those change makers by not using that word anymore. And trust me, I'm sure things will change. Our attitudes will change. So in this one is my mother. She was an example. In the state of Maine, Maine was always trying to get rid of the Maliseets and telling them, that's what they call themselves, Maliseets, and trying to tell them, go back to Canada where you belong. My mother was one of the ones who said, we didn't put the border there, you did. And so my mom, along with other strong women and men, stood their ground and told Maine, we're not moving. And they did, and to this day, the Holton Band of Maliseets is established from that stance. And they actually kept a book called the Green Book, where it had the names of those people who stood their ground. So that's, so I come from a long line of those kind of women who stood there. And I remember in the state of Maine, they were trying to, come together as a nation. Wabanaki, Passamaquoddies, Penobscots, Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, Abenakis tried to come, but of course the Maine state decided to separate them, divide and conquer. They gave Passamaquoddies the first land claim. Then they gave the Penobscots the second land claim, the Mi'kmaq their land claim. But they still didn't give one to the Maliseets, because in their eyes, Maliseets belong in Canada, not in Maine. But those women, like my mom, stood there. And today, I'm so proud of that community. It was a potato field, but in that potato field, you should see what's been done. I'm showcasing that heritage Wabanaki corn down in front on my altar. They're growing that. They're growing sweetgrass. They're growing muskrat root. They're growing sage. They're growing their own tobacco. And so that's resilience. And I'm proud of them for doing that. So that's the first part of resilience from my grandmothers and mothers before me. I do a prenatal program called Olowignea Gwechkowabazitit. And it's a prenatal postnatal program that's culturally based. That means I have the honor of singing to babies while they're still in the womb, in the language. Think about that. So they're already hearing their language before they even come to sing to us. And we don't call, when babies cry, what the doctors will say, babies first cry, we call it their first chant. And just last week, I was in helping a delivery, a natural birth of a little girl from, Kingsclear First Nation who came into the world. We drummed her in. It was amazing, and so that's resilience. That little moss bag, that was one part of the things we wanted to make sure that we didn't have detachment issues with our new moms. So we started to teach the women how to make moss bags again, to carry our babies in moss bags on cradle boards and, just the way we did it before and not, put them away over there on a swing or over there on a thing. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm just saying there's so much of that in that other way of raising babies that we wanted to bring a traditional way. Having grandmothers, every baby should be held by every grandmother in that community. So I used to do grandmother circles where the newest baby, would be introduced to the elder in the community so that there was never a disconnect. Oh, I didn't know there was another baby born to that family, because every child that's born to us is ours, not just the parents. And, and that's what I told the mom, it's not just your baby, it's ours too, and so, So that's resilience, but we have to start it with the babies. And of course, this is one of the things that I do, and we will be doing again and again and again. It took a while because I had to, this is a burying placentas. Ginsuzuk means honoring our ancestors. Those ancestors, the DNA of placenta, supports and secures that child in the mother's womb. We can't just leave it behind when the baby is born. We have to give it back to our Earth Mother and do a beautiful ceremony and teach the community how to be the whole community raising that child. So what we do is it's wrapped in cloth in a plastic container at first, and everybody holds it up and will say, I'm the basket maker of this community. I'm going to make sure this child knows how to make a basket. My responsibility will be my secret recipes. My responsibility will be drumming, my hunting, whatever it is. But it's so beautiful to hear a whole community and the parents just listen, knowing they're not the only ones raising that child. And so that's what we're doing here. This was in Woodstock First Nation. I've been doing it for, this is my 11th year of doing it. So a lot of babies have been named, which is my gift to my nation, is to have all those babies named in our traditional language. And I'll tell you why it came to me. It's because it was during a ceremony of fasting at the mounds. And what I saw was elders with their blankets wrapped around them. And all of a sudden, they all stood up, and over the hill came these children with their little blankets, but they had no faces. And the message the children were saying was, how can we save the language if you don't name us in our own language? And I decided 21 years ago, I'll start with my grandchildren. So that's important, to give them a traditional name. It's not just picking a name, because sometimes parents will say, I thought I named them Feather and blah, 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 which are nice names. But I says, no, I'm going to do it in the language. It has to mean something, because it's a responsibility, like my name has been. I've lost someone is a responsibility, So it's teaching the child. So I have amazing stories of all of those naming ceremonies. And I have to remember the first time we did it in Woodstock First Nation as a community. I had 13 babies, placentas, to bury all at once. And I remember everybody going, gross, yuck. Today, you'll hear the little kids say, oh, that's our ancestor, and it's kind of neat, isn't it? And so there's this excitement and acceptance. But that never would have happened if we didn't go back to the way that we do. Like my bucket list is I want to see a traditional birthing center in our First Nation community. I'm so working towards that. Lintawaganal, our songs. How can our children learn their songs if we don't sing it to them? And so here's one of the programs that we do. We call it Dungog Social. It's how are you social? How's your spirit social? And so we start, bringing traditional things to children so that they're not afraid of the drum. Because elders always say, don't tell your child, if your child is going to a drum, don't say, get away, don't touch that. Because if you do that at an early age, they won't want those ceremonial objects. And so we start, bringing those things to the babies, making them smell the medicine so that they don't say, pew, what's that smell? Because it happens. Because we have policies in schools that don't allow smudging. So we have our own youth that don't know how to or can't because there's no policy for it. And so we have to begin. There's some more met babies. I let them chew on muskrat root, gilhuswask. We're people of muskrat. And so muskrat root is our preventative from all of the things that come at us. Whatever flu comes, we're ready. But it's been affected because of the farmers and the chemicals they put. Then it goes into the waters, into the roots, and so it's affected. That's why I'm proud of the muskrat root that we're growing in Maine, because it's not near any farms. It's growing without those chemicals, so it will be real medicine and no harm to it. Wolastoqey Treaty Day. So we've started acknowledging, our traditional chiefs here have started, our chiefs have started to acknowledge that we have to acknowledge our treaties. What do they mean? And we have to go as far as like what Pam has been saying. We used to have a place called Zagamog. It's been renamed Mount Carlton. But our chiefs, our leaders, clan mothers, community members used to go there, and they would fast. They would do ceremony. They would come together as a nation, the Wabanakis, the whole Wabanaki nation, and they would be there, and get ready for the important work they had to do among their nations. Another one used to be called Savage Island. It's before the dam was built. But my people used to go there. All our peoples used to go there. They could survive off the land. They didn't have to buy groceries before they went there because, sweetgrass was going there. The salmon was plentiful. The fiddleheads were there, and it was a good gathering place. So lucky for us, as a resilience, we didn't like the name Savage Island. So a young man from our community decided we're going to give it its traditional name, Ekpahug, where the tide ends. And so these are excellent things that are happening to showcase that resilience, that we're not going to accept Savage Island. I remember in Maine, working at the University of Maine Presque Isle, and they wanted to change Squaw Mountain. I think now it's Moose Mountain. You know what I mean? So those things have to happen, and those things are happening. So in this treaty day, not too often do we get all our chiefs together, but that day they all come together. Madawaska, Maliseet, even in Quebec came, and stuff, because we have Kakuna Vijay is a Maliseet community where my roots come from too. My maternal grandfather's from there. And so we invited them as well. And so one of the things that's important for them is that traditional leadership, so we dress them with moccasins. And the reason moccasins are important as a leader is to honor the four-leggeds that we're related to. And so the moccasins, when they're put on the chief, is to say, we put moccasins on you as a baby, but now you're a baby leader in a way. So you have to have moccasins because there's a different earth walk you have to perform now. You walk with your people, not in front of them, not behind them, but beside them. We put a vest that promises, for the males, or a shawl for the women, so that they carry the burdens of their people. and they're willing to do that. And so it's witnessed. And then, of course, you'll notice the headdresses. They were turkey feathers, that were traditional because of the giveaway, the generosity of the turkey. And it's to accept spiritual knowledge as well. And the peaked hat means the same thing. It's knowledge beyond our physical thinking. It's spiritual knowledge, and that's what the peaked hats are. So to see our traditional leaders symbolize, we just have to make sure they follow those things as well. So we celebrate that annually. This year, I was curious about Watertown Treaty, and I wanted to know how they reenacted. And when I went there, I was very disappointed because it was just men in colonial costumes and reading the treaty, and I was upset by what the treaty said. Like Pam was saying, military allies. It said there, we want you to promise that you're not going to trade with the French, and you'll trade only with the British, and you'll be our people, And so I'm going, wait a minute, how is that a relationship? For one thing, maybe we don't want to fight. And so, again, we're brought into a system that brings that war, that HATE reaction. So in that room, that's Chief Sabatis from Holton Band. She was just elected last year. And she came and represented that. And of course, Dave was former chief of Tobic. So it's the first time real chiefs have ever been to this reenactment. What was missing was ceremony. They invited a Mi'kmaq drum group to come from Nova Scotia, but they didn't have anything to say. They just performed. And I was disappointed that it wasn't a real treaty reenactment. It was just, we'll invite them, like Pam said, that dressing, but not a real thing. So I promised them, I'm coming back next year. I'm going to bring pipe. I'm going to bring ceremony. I'm going to bring wampum belt. I'm going to bring, our experts on what the treaty feels like to us. Najibudwazol Dijik, so Ormukta First Nation Chief Shelley Sabatis wanted a traditional inauguration, and so we planned one, and in it they were building a longhouse, and then she had a council of grandmothers, and these council of grandmothers have since helped promote so many cultural things. They had their first powwow, for example. It's been 35 years, I think, since they had a gathering there. They've had also, right now we're doing a community immersion. That means every director, every employee has to learn something in the language, not just the school, not just the children, not just, the grandparents. The community is learning the language together. So that comes from having a council of elders, a council of grandmothers, clan mothers that look in the community and see what needs to be done. That's resilience. Of course, here's my brother. And people called him a residential school survivor because he went to Shubi. And the only reason that I was spared, the day that the Indian agent came to get us both, the Indian agent said, Mrs. Bernard, you're too old to be watching your grandchildren. I'm going to take them to a good school. And my grandmother tried to hold us both back. And when my brother tried to run away, he got caught by the Indian agent. And I remember him crying. And I remember my grandmother saying, well, if you think I'm too old, I'm going to need my granddaughter because she's going to have to help me around the house. And that's how I got spared. But he went. He ran away. It's almost like that story that Gord Downey wrote about. We didn't see him for almost 30 years because he was always afraid to come back to New Brunswick because he thought he'd be arrested. So he stayed drinking. I just lost him a few years ago because he drank himself to death. That's not surviving. You know, thank you, government, for giving him money to enjoy his drinking hardier. You know, that was his reward, I guess. So in that's in the Tobic First Nation, in that community. And salmon is coming home, you know. And what we did with that coming home is we hosted a feast here, you know, healing our survivors. We had an honoring feast, and we made sure that we fed as our feast salmon, fiddleheads, corn soup, fry bread, all the things that the residential school wouldn't have had for them. And we made sure that they had that. So we were able to do that feast. We did what we called a medicine wheel garden. We invited survivors in our territory here to come and watch the children plant the garden that's in front of Marshall Davery Hall. And we planted, you know, about maybe 12 different species of medicines, which are growing well, as a symbol of this healing that has to happen. My brothers and sister, our survivors healing us. My brother Wayne Nicholas went around the world talking about resilience and how he's been able to heal. He actually, right now in Woodstock First Nation, I'm supposed to be there. They're having a wampum SISM, critical incident stress management, that's done in a traditional way so that we can address those suicides, those, you know, mental health issues, methadone. Too many methadone clinics are popping up in our communities, you know, and so, but he started that, and I was with him when it started. So we're continuing to keep it, and today, where there's training for our people in Woodstock right now for the next few days in how do we address our own critical incident stress that happens in our communities. That's our way of dealing with it, and that's resilience. Skijinawigakidwagan. And this is a school in Ormukto. I went to all the principals of Ormukto, and I told them, you have a responsibility, as much attention as you pay to Base Gage Town children, we want that same attention given to our First Nations children that are coming to your schools. We need language. You need to support language in their communities. So they do things offline. I have a lot of things online, so what they do is they download things. Principals will learn, and every year, I think we're having our 3rd annual or 4th annual all Indigenous Christmas concert. Every school has taken a role to, even the teachers and the principals will say something in the language, and we present it to the elders in the community. And so what's really important about that, for me, it's education at its best. This is the kind of thing it has to happen, you know, and stuff. Only because calls to action, objective number 6, they call it, where they're going to incorporate content of our cultures into the public school system. But for me, I want more than that. I want another call to action where each and every one of us take the responsibility of grading the school where our children are learning, not the other way around. Our children are always labeled, you know, literacy is this, you know, numeracy is this, you know, they're always testing our children. They're okay. It's the environment. Like Pam said, more Indigenous teachers, more subjects, more cultural realia, you know, our own building where we can do the ceremonies without having to have a policy, you know, those kind of things. And I want to be that commissioner that goes around and grades the schools so I can give them their data report on how bad they're doing when it comes to that call to action that's supposedly part of a 10-year plan for New Brunswick. Skijinawida Zawagan, is that thinking in the language, that cultural pride. So this is a community in Ormukdu that, Health Canada was saying, detrimental, 80% are on methadone. But you should see them now because they're doing traditional ceremonies. They're doing, language programs. They're having a traditional sort of government, not all the way yet, which is something we have to work on, like Pam said, But there's things happening. There's changes. And of course, I think I went too far. Yeah. Sorry. The Sweat Lodge, Nadal's Wigwam, sacred spaces. Sacred spaces are important. Matter of fact, when I work for Health Canada, I also work on another program called Chil Wallach Mixawagan. In my language, it means for healthier mind, body, and spirit. So I work with psychiatrists and psychologists and mental health across the country on trying to lessen the prescriptions that are being doled out. I mean, I know of doctors. We've told on these doctors that they won't even look at you. Got pain? Here's your prescription. And they wonder why there is an opioid crisis, because it's so easy to get. And unfortunately, they're near our First Nation communities. So there's a low tolerance for pain now where we're told, you have a headache, here's a pill. You can't sleep, here's a pill. You're depressed, here's a pill. You're this, you're that, you're that. So I've been working in that field for a long time trying to say, wait a minute, give us the same kind of money to build our lodges in our community so we have another alternative to go to. Bring us medicines, because we're not allowed to pick it because it's Crown land. So let's go to eBay and buy sage. Let's go to eBay and buy little shells. Because we don't have, as people of the river, we don't have very much river space to do a ceremony. St. Mary's, we're lucky to have that one little place where we have our powwow. But I look all the way down the street this way and all the way that way, and it's, whoa, there's more people of the river than us. They're living on the river, we're not. So we use our little space for ceremony. So we need more of those sacred spaces. And if you ever visit a reservation, I'm so envious. David and I were gifted to go to Fort Smith recently. They don't live on a reservation, the Dene. You saw packs of wolves, not a wolf on a wall. You saw buffalo on the side of the road that you couldn't help but, admire. Water was clean. You could see the fish. And we could, if we were hungry, the elder just went, got us fish, cooked it over the open fire. It was amazing. They're coming here to New Brunswick next year. And I told them, I said, you're going to be disappointed. We're on reservations. You might see a dog, lots of dogs, cat, maybe a rabbit, but you're not going to see what we just saw here. And so I think it's going to be a rude awakening for them to see that, how lucky they are not to be living on reservations. Because when we were put there, think about this, our food security was affected. They didn't tell the salmon, this is as far as Tobic line goes. They didn't tell the moose, I'm sorry, but you can't go here because then it's Crown land. So now we're eating canned salmon. So that leads to this health problem that we have. So that's why we need these sacred spaces. Domestic violence is rampant, and I'm passionate about that as well. That's why I really appreciate all the organizations that are doing the awareness. So when I do a traditional wedding, I gift them with a wedding shawl that Gwen Bear learned from another elder, an Ojibwe elder. And the red, yeah, I meant to bring it, but it's only about this high, and long. But it's a feather with, a shawl with 2 eagle feathers at the end that the couple earn because they come into the sweat lodge before they get married, so that they can be worn together from the lodge. So they start their wedding prep way before they get married. It's not just a interesting thing to do different. There is a preparation. They have to, they have to pick cedar, and when they do their vows on cedar, it's their promise to each other that past relationships will not be brought up. There's a pipe ceremony, the same pipe that I use here, because on that pipe that I used this morning, it has the sun, the grass, and a tree, meaning, we have to be those trees to stay rooted to our cultural resilience. And so the groom will carry the female part of the pipe. The female will carry the male part of the pipe, and they hold it up as they're coming together. And then I put it together as a symbol to them that they're going to accept everything about each other, the maleness and the femaleness, so that there's no gender conflict. And Nizwit Dijik literally means two living as one, two breathing as one, two, loving as one. And so when I do the pipe ceremony, it's so that may their thinking be one, may their bodies be one, may their hearts be one, and may their spirits be one. And if we did that more often, trust me, I doubt if there'll be, I'd like to check up on all the couples I've married to see if there's any domestic violence. I don't think there would be, because they take that shawl when there's an argument. Their promise is it has to be in the bedroom so that when they do have an argument, they don't go to bed mad. They wrap that around them. They hold their eagle feather so that they'll learn how to be truthful. The best gift a couple can give to each other is truth. And that's what they do. So I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this would be a really good way to stop domestic violence. So I've been really lucky. Actually, I just did one on Saturday. And rest in peace, Gord Downing. I didn't realize having a picture taken with him that he would go away, but what gratitude we owe him. He was a treaty partner, a real treaty partner. May he be an example of what a real treaty partner is. So for me, I tweeted, and I said, "You were a star among us, but now you'll always be eternally a star above us. He won't be forgotten." This is the word that our VP this morning has been learning. We actually had conferences. Bilwi Dahaz Zawal Zawagan. Bilwi Dahaz means change in attitude. It's okay to change attitudes, like Pam said, that's the surface. Yeah, I know you guys, we owe you things. But walking the talk is what she's talking about. So the word reconciliation, right off the bat, when I was asked to translate, I said, it's a noun. It's not a noun to us, it's a verb. So it has to be an action. It can't just be a thought. It can't be an attitude. It has to be, what are you going to do with that attitude? What are you going to do with that change? And that's what that word means. Bilwidahazwavsawagan. It's walking the talk. So the delta, this is the belt, if you go to the Can-Do conference that's coming up and tomorrow's sunrise ceremony, you'll see this. So David and I did what we call Circle of Understanding workshop for their executive team. And their question to us was, what can we do as a, hotel franchise to show our guests that come here that we have a good treaty relationship? Get a wampum belt. Mean it. Show it. And so they asked artists from NBCCD to design one. And this one was chosen, and it's actually beautiful because it actually has 4 colors on it. So it's peace and hospitality is what its name is. This year, we have a council of elders from the UNB, campus here. Our council of elders planted sweetgrass in a sweetgrass garden outside of the Delta, so that it can be there, for our communities if they want to go and get that. Red Shawl campaign. We've, when I went out west, I saw all the red dresses hanging, and I was silent. And I know Dave will say, I don't believe it, because he says I talk too much. But it was so evoking that when I came back here, I made a promise that New Brunswick was going to hear about it too, that New Brunswick was going to learn about it. And so we just last week finished our 3rd year, and it's evolved. It's evolved so much, since then. We've had the mayor involved this year. He actually put a red light on City Hall so that people would say, why is it red? I'm hoping people asked. Lieutenant Governor did the same thing in her house. She also did that. And you might still see shawls hanging in front of the Lieutenant Governor's house. We did a healing walk, and I have to admit, last year when we did the healing walk, we were told we didn't give enough notice to walk on the streets. We had to walk up by the river. It's a nice little walk there, but we ended up coming into the back of Lieutenant Governor's house. I had no idea that I would take that personally until this year. We gave enough notice this year, and we walked on the streets, so cars had to, we had to have police escort. When we got to Lieutenant Governor's house, I got emotional because I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm going through the front door, not the back door. We're on the street, not the side street. And Veronica goes, are you okay? I said, I just had no idea this was going to mean that much to me. That's reconciliation action, And so that's the Atlantic Ballet. They did the Ghost of Violence last year. We painted their moccasins. I wanted moccasins. They said, ballet dancers can't wear moccasins and dance. I said, oh, okay, well, can we make them look like moccasins? So last year we had a Mi'kmaq artist who did beautiful work and painted on the point shoes, I think they're called. This year, Natalie Sapier painted on them. Like there'll be posters that'll be made later of how beautiful they are. Before they go on that stage to dance on behalf of my murdered and missing Aboriginal women and sisters, I bless their feet. I bless the stage. I bless the auditorium. I bless Igor, the one who accepted some of the changes, because he thought I was just going to watch. I said, no, I need to change some of the music. Oh, you're going to bring drums? I said, no, I want a flute. This year, wow, were we gifted with the Aquin sisters and Natalie Sapier singing in harmony. Amazing. I already have something for next year. Like I said, because there's young girls taking contemporary dance, so I think next year I'm going to include a young Indigenous girl doing a contemporary dance. So to get her up on stage, so to perform with pride. So the bells, we had church bells ringing because I wanted people downtown in the morning. What are the church bells ringing for? Oh, it's to pray for the families of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Then we had another church, did it in the afternoon. That way, it's constant reminders because we can't forget, like Pam said, let's not forget. Let's not forget. Every time you go to a mall. I always tell people, try to park far away so you can walk for our sisters that don't walk anymore. Those elders who can't get up anymore and get that close. I mean, there's just a whole lot of earth walking we have to do ourselves, and that's the action that we're talking about here. So, of course, Gigahana healing. So this is our way of healing. This was at the mounds. After 20 years, we started fasting there. And for a 20th anniversary, all I asked for was 7 pipes for 7 directions. I got 9 people came to fast. And actually, I'm going back there next week to feast my name, because that's where we did all these ceremonies. But just this picture alone can tell you, this is what we have to tell Health Canada. We have to tell them we have ways of healing that doesn't take a prescription. We have ways of honoring those who might be feeling depressed or those who are going through emotions they don't know how to handle. It's through these ceremonies. And we have to get them babies, puberty, weddings. We even have, for elders, we have a lot of ceremonies that still need to be tapped into. This is how we earn our pipes. So when we talk about, how Western society measures somebody's contribution, if you're not published, then you're not academically ready. So when I was refused a grant a few years ago, I started writing down, okay, it took me 4 years for this pipe, 4 more years for that pipe, 4 more years for that pipe, 4 years of Sundance for this, 4 more years of this, and I'm going, whoa, I think I went to school longer than you guys have went. So I think I can offer some knowledge, but it's not recognized in the same way. And our elders are the scholars that we go to ask for guidance. But they're just informants. They're more than informants. They're scholars. And I'm losing so many at a fast pace that I'm worried. I have less elders to go to today than I did a few years ago. And so I have to work harder. That's why we have elders in training, our drummers, our pipe carriers, the grandmothers on the land. So with Abexoltiak, this is a mural, first thing that I did as elder in residence. I was only stepping in after the sudden death of the first elder in residence, Gwen Bear. And I remember shaping that position just for her, not realizing she wasn't going to be in it for too long. So I just stepped in for a while, because I already had my work with Health Canada. And I ended up still there. So I think I'm there till I'm 70 another year. But I asked our dean, Ann Sherman, who was more than willing, the late Ann Sherman, who was more than willing, what can we do, Imelda? What do you want to do? I said, well, I want a mural. I want my students, any student that comes here, to see how it was before contact, how ecologically sound we were because of our canoes, how we lived off the land, how we had food security. We were healthier. We didn't have opioid crisis back then. I, as a child, remember cupping wolastuk and drinking her like this with my hands. That was just 68 years ago. What's changed? What's the responsibilities? What's the resilience we're looking for, not just for us as Indigenous peoples, but your resilience? Because, like Pam said, it's not just for our children. It's 7th-generation thinking for everybody. So on the mural, it tells a story of itself, but I think it's going to be part of the document for UNB. They're actually doing a paper where all faculties will get it, and it's going to talk about the symbolism, the sun, the moon, the bear, the trees, the salmon, the water, the canoes, the 8-point star, the peaked hat, the medallion, the medicine pouch. All of that has a story to tell about identity. And like I said, what's really important about identity is that language. And that's why I'm proud of the grandmothers. Actually, we're going to be doing a ceremony there Sunday, the grandmothers are. And we're, when I was interviewed by CBC a long time ago, when Sisson was a thought. And my interview didn't make it on air because I said, what do you mean St. Mary's couldn't prove that it was traditional territory? When we go into the woods, we offer our tobacco and ask permission to enter the woods. We ask the standing ones, the trees. We ask the insects. We ask the birds. We ask the four-leggeds. Is it okay if I come in? I promise I'm going to leave it just the way I found it. So what evidence did they want us to leave behind? Cigarette butts? Trash? A Walmart? A gas bar? So we're going to make it sacred. We're going to bury our placentas there. We're going to keep doing ceremony. We're going to keep telling the tree people, you're going to hear your language again. You're going to hear your songs. You're going to hear, the women teaching the next generation how to stay as beautiful. So I told the women grandmothers, let's do an eco-tourism project. I'm sure if anybody visited, they wouldn't want to turn it into a mine. It's that sacred. Waliwan, Walalin, merci, thank you.
It's 5 after 12, so we're not going to have time for questions. We do have a gift for her. Ian, would you have I just wanted to, while we're waiting for her gift, I just wanted to emphasize the point, and of course Pam mentioned this as well, and I mentioned it earlier, that the treaties protect the cultural practices that Imelda had just explained and described. We have to go beyond just saying that the treaties protect hunting and fishing and language rights and self-determination rights, but it's also the cultural practices associated with all of those activities. So it's important for us to make that case that the peace and friendship treaties are also protecting our cultural practices. Will you?
I hope it has a land deed.
Thank you, everyone.